Morning.
Yeah, good morning. It's a great start. I'm on mute.
Oh, yeah, my volume was right down. So I'm like, there's always that heart-stopping moment. All right, have we got to
Exactly.
push all the buttons?
So Cathy's coming in, I think, around 8:15.
Okay,
She's
okay,
given us all her questions that she wants us to ask her and
okay, cool.
her
Brilliant,
little bio and stuff. So, and then
brilliant.
she wants to do her slideshow herself.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so that she doesn't have to keep asking us to change slides.
Yeah, good idea. So I was thinking this time, if it's all right with you, I'll just sit very much in the background and kind of let you run it.
Yeah, probably Louise will run it because I'm
Oh,
going to
okay.
be doing a lot of the corridor. So
Okay, cool.
yeah,
So
and
letting
she,
people in and like everything, basically as if I'm
oh,
not
yeah,
here in
yeah,
case
yeah,
I need to be here.
yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
We've got Maree, Londeen, she's early. One thing I've realised is that what we've kind of got so used to we're doing it. I think I might have mentioned this. We're not, I don't know when it dropped off. We're not putting at the beginning of the slides who we are or even kind of introducing ourselves. So that's something that I've got to try, bring back in. And in the master slides, I haven't got that on the master slides. And I think that's when it's
Yeah,
falling
because
away. We're
I
making an
put
assumption.
I put a slide in with our
Mhm.
pictures, yours, mine, and
Oh,
Louise's, just saying he's
oh,
the
cool.
PLN team.
Oh, well
That's what
done.
you do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Okay, I might pinch that and then put that on the format for everybody.
Oh yeah, because it's just a basic. It's just the blank slide, obviously. I've just
Yeah,
chucked the photos on off the website.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
cool. It was Michelle, and yeah, so and I meant to do it before I sent out. I've just sent out a couple of like the pace one,
Yeah.
and I meant to chuck that in at the beginning and didn't. So
All good.
try and get ahead of that a little
Can't
one.
do everything.
No.
Gosh.
Yeah. How's it going?
It's interesting, actually. At the moment, we've got our ex-practice leader who's probably going to be put on a support plan. We're not
Yeah.
recording, are we? Um,
No,
and
no.
yeah, these
Oh, hold
schools.
on. We are.
Oh, shivers.
Hang
Okay.
on.
To the second session for this supporting neurodiversity through a universal design for learning lens team. We've got a real treat for you guys today. Louise, if you could move to the next slide, and we'll start with karakia. We'll start with karakia anyway. Ngā mihi o te rā ki te whānau e hui hui nei, kia tau te rangi Maree, ia whakatapua tātou me ngā mea, e whakapono ana tātou, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. Next slide, please, Louise.
Sorry, I've just worked out that it will only change on my mouse for some reason, so I'm sorry if I go through too many slides. Have you got the next slide?
No.
You haven't got the next slide. Oh dear. That means it's not sharing my slides properly either. We had this problem this morning. I'm sorry, everybody. Let me just see if I can change that. Is it changing now?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. It seems that we are not having a very good moment with shares.
Guys, I suggest stop share and see if we can.
And you know what? Again, I can't stop share. There seems to be an issue with being able to stop share as well.
All right. I'll
Force share as well.
Yeah, I'll just do that very quickly.
Go.
Have
Sorry, everybody. We're just having issues with technical stuff.
Yeah, and have I got a copy of the slides? Shall I try and?
Yes.
Okay,
Do you
cool.
want me to reshare?
No, I'll get them up.
It's this cold weather. Nobody's it's not wanting to do what we want it to.
Yeah, it's been a bit
funny. thanks everybody for coming up. We're sorry about this. We've had a few issues with the computer.
You might need to reshare. It's not showing up.
Okay.
It's okay.
Maybe now, Fee.
Yep, cool. Look,
You got it?
bear with. We can do this. Right, okay. So we have liftoff.
Thanks for being patient, everybody.
Best laid
Oh,
plans.
goodness.
Okay. And okay.
And you'll be able to look back on this, people, and see it because we didn't stop the sharing, the
Right.
recording. Here we go.
Hopefully some bits will be edited out. Okay, so one of the things that we realise that we haven't been doing very well is introducing ourselves as PLN members. So the team that you've got today from the PLN is obviously myself, Louise, who's doing the techie stuff, and we've been guided by Fee as well today. Next slide. So our whakatauki for today is Nau te roro, nāku te roro, ka ora ai te iwi. And I think as we progress through the presentation, you'll see why we've chosen that whakatauki. So our agenda, pretty soon I'm going to be introducing our guest speakers, and they're going to be talking about what they've been doing in their cluster. So then we'll have some time with our guest speakers, and at the end there'll be time for questions, and then Louise will talk about next steps. So just our housekeeping, those of you who have been here before will be very familiar with this. Please mute unless you're sharing. We are recording the session and we'll share it with you. Please add any gems or pātai to the chat throughout. And we'll respond to those at the end of the session. And as usual, in the spirit of the Professional Learning Network, let's connect, inspire, and uplift each other. So it's my pleasure today to introduce you to Cathy and Maree. So Cathy is the cluster manager for North Shore Cluster 4 and was a former establishment co-lead of this Professional Learning Network. With over 40 years of experience in education, Cathy has worked across 3 RTLB clusters in Tamaki Makaurau since the service was established in 1999. So prior to that, she taught in both primary and secondary schools. Cathy's a passionate advocate for inclusion and equity. Her leadership is grounded in systems thinking and a strong belief in the power of inclusive education to transform lives. So welcome, Cathy. Next to Cathy, we have Maree. Maree is in Cluster 4. She's been in Cluster 4 since 2017. Prior to this, she worked in primary schools across the North Shore. So Maree is the strategic leader for inclusion for Cluster 4. She works with a professional learning group of 7 RTLB to support inclusive practice for teachers, schools, and RTLB. So before we launch into Cathy and Maree's slideshow, we've just got a few questions. So you ready, Cathy? Okay, so what started your UDL journey?
Kia ora e te whānau. It's lovely to be talking to the RTLB community today. Our journey started way back in 2019 when one of my secondaries, the secondary school that I was a liaison in, was inviting an expert, Dr. John Mondorf, over to do some UDL work in the high school. And we just took it from there, and it grew legs in terms of the ministry. We're at that time introducing UDL and writing some work for TKI. So we all jumped on. There was an opportunity for us to share with John. We got him for a day. We had him for a day with our Senkos on the North Shore. And then we also organised a day in Ellerslie for people. I think some of the RTLB might remember coming up for that. And then we had this wonderful, thank you to the ministry, helped fund John to share with a group of RTLB in Wellington. So we've started this story a long way back, and it started with that little flame. And I think people prior to that had been doing UDL as well. So that was the beginning of our journey anyway.
Nice. And I was one of those RTLB that attended John Mundell's session in Wellington. It was brilliant. So why is UDL important to you as an RTLB?
I guess UDL is an inclusive framework that works. And I think for a long time, RTLB have been searching for really good, simplistic way of guiding teachers' practice into inclusion. And of course, inclusion is our key guiding principle in our practice.
Absolutely. So you've obviously referenced Dr. Mundell. So what happened post his visit?
So post his visit, we just got all these calls from Senkos. As you know, when you do a presentation and with a group of Senkos, there was he made a lot of sense for Senkos and for school leaders. And but we quickly realised that we didn't really know a lot about UDL ourselves. So the demands on us were high. People were ringing saying, can you come and do some presentations? So we started to take a deep dive, and we formulated a professional learning group. And we've been working through that. We've had 2 iterations of that, and Maree's here to talk about the next stage of that. But initially, I led the professional learning group to kick it off, to have a deep dive looking in the theory and the practice, because we felt like, although John had some amazing gems and it all made sense, it didn't really make sense to us and to be confident as practitioners to go out and talk about UDL out there.
Yeah, definitely had that experience myself. So you talked about the professional learning group. What were some of the highlights of leading that group?
So the highlights for me were us. COVID came along at that time in 2020, and John had arranged, I'd actually got a sabbatical, and he'd arranged for me to go over and meet a whole lot of people in cast. And unfortunately, I had to cancel my trip. But that gave us, as a professional learning group, some breathing time to start to do a deep dive into UDL ourselves. And the more we dove in, as people will realise, the more you realise that you don't know. So for the next few years, we did a really good inward looking around what it meant as RTLB practitioners and how we could actually make it practical, sustainable, and easy for teachers to understand.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that insight, Cathy. It definitely helps as we head into your slideshow now. Thank you.
Great. So I'm just going to show you a few bits and pieces that we did in the PLG. But I think the most of this talk is going to be Maree, because as you know, the landscape in education is changing so rapidly at the moment. And when I look back at what we were doing in 2020 to 2022 even, it's changed. The checkpoints have changed, lots have changed. So I'm just going to give you a few snapshots of things that I believed really worked for our community of practice or our professional learning group. And whilst they have moved forward, and Maree's got more up-to-date ideas around these, but these are just some rough concepts that I found really worked for us. Next slide. So we're just going to look at the matrix. Do you want to flip to the next slide? So our approach was, we had 2 people from each team, and then I designed a bit of a study group with some of the key links and videos that related to UDL, and that every time we met as a team, the PLG members would share one of these links or a little paper, research paper or something. And then there were about 2 or 3 key, just reflective questions. How does this impact on how does this look like in my RTLB practice? And I think that was really helpful. We started with, I designed a bit of like with every community of practice, I always think it's really good to do a measure of our learning and the impact of that. So I designed a matrix around UDL, if you want to flick to the next. So this is just the starting point, and basically what the community practice or the PLG members did was highlight where they felt like, next slide, where they felt they were at and what might be their next steps in learning around UDL. Next slide. So one of the key things that we started off with was looking at the framework. And basically we took out all the checkpoints and we just sat with the engagement, representation, action and expression. And for many of us, we used it in multiple ways. We used it as a blank form just to record what we could see in the classroom. We used the questions on the left-hand side for when we were training with secondary school teachers. We did quite a lot with secondary school teachers because it seemed to make sense to them applying UDL in their classrooms. So we did some group planning with maths faculties and English faculties and just brainstorming how they get, if they chose a unit of work, how they get to keep students interested, how they get information into students' heads, and how do they show what they've learned. So trying to simplify the framework into a practical kind of tool. We also would sit alongside with a teacher with the 3 principles and say, so what are the things that you're already doing that engage students in your classroom? And what are the ways that you get information to embed into their learning? And how do you help them show? So there were nice kind of introductory conversations around the framework. Wasn't pushing the whole UDL thing. Next slide. So this is just a little bit of the guide, a little bit of a snapshot, and I'm happy to share this, but I'm a little bit worried that it's out of date now because the landscape has changed so much. But as you can see, I embedded a lot of key kind of resources and things from Katie Novak, from Chrissy Butler, and there was some discussion questions. I made one for the RTLBs, and I also made one for teacher groups who were starting to form professional learning groups themselves within schools. And some of us helped facilitate those groups. And these were good starting points in terms of introducing UDL and just little bits and pieces each time we met. Next slide. The book club model, I would highly recommend if you're doing a professional learning group. We started with the University Design Leadership with Katie Novak. And what we did was we read a chapter before we met. And then at the beginning of each meeting we had as a professional learning group, we just discussed that chapter, the key points, and how that impacted on our work. And that kind of provided us a good way of rushing into our meeting from all our casework and getting really focused into what we were there for. The one that we moved on to after that was what really works with Universal Design for Learning, the blue one. And that's got lots of little chapters on how you can apply UDL to a science classroom or to maths or whatever. So we did lots of deep dives into that as we developed our themes around our meetings. And the other one that I absolutely loved was your UDL journey. And that's with Elizabeth Burquest. And I was able to speak with her. John hooked me up with a meeting with her and talked about her journey with UDL. And she's an amazing dynamic person. And I would highly recommend that one because the journey in that, I think we've based a lot of the Aotearoa RTLB, PLN stuff on. If you have a look on their website, it's based on part of her journey. Next slide. Looking at the checkpoints, they've all changed. So as I say, some of my resources and things are a little bit out of date, but change is happening quite rapidly in all the spaces. But I really love the new checkpoints, and Maree's going to talk a little bit about them going forward. Next slide. So in the checkpoints, what we did was we went through each of them and we said, what does this checkpoint mean? And what does it look like in a New Zealand classroom? So each member of the PLG took a checkpoint and they made a little slide. This is an example of a slide. These are the old checkpoints, just saying. And they talked about what it meant. And next slide. And then they said what it might look like in a New Zealand classroom. So we've got 3 sets of slides, which are out of date now because we've got new checkpoints, where each member did a deep dive into one of these principles and talked about what it looked like. So if you were going into a classroom and you'd identified that a student or a teacher might want to work deeper on recruiting interest, you can use this slide as some examples and some resources. So it became a really kind of deep resource. But again, as I say, it's a little bit out of date now. So probably time to do a deep dive in the new checkpoints. Can you flick to the next slide? This is another example of what some of the members did in terms of creating slides around some of the checkpoints. Next slide. What it might look like in a New Zealand classroom. And a lot of these checkpoints had little wee buttons where you could push where they would talk and things like that. So the team were incredibly creative with this, just showing them off. So what have we learned so far is that it's difficult to support schools unless you know the theory and the practice of UDL. And unless you felt confident and when you had your eyes all over it, you couldn't really start. We found we started to flounder. We don't necessarily today in this climate, we don't use the word UDL. We use the inclusive framework. We're talking about inclusive frameworks, not the word UDL, but we use all the principles that underline it. What schools say and what they mean can be different, and you'll all know what I'm talking about there. So we often had schools saying, yes, we want to do UDL. We did a big systems rollout and we sold it to the leadership team, and then we had this 3-year plan, and then just things get in the way. And that first year we were really doing lots of great work with the leadership team. Then the key DP who was driving the UDL actually got a principal's job. So you know how movable that is in schools and how you start to get really excited. And so we're not thinking big picture anymore, and Maree will elaborate on this a bit more. We're thinking around what's doable and achievable within a classroom right now. We also acknowledge that many RTLB and teachers are already doing UDL, they just don't know it. And that it also, in our cluster, we have a common language about it. We know about learner variability. We know about choice and voice and all the inclusive language that comes with UDL, which has been really helpful. Next slide. So I'm going to hand over to Maree because this is more recent work, and I think this is where we should really shine a light on our next steps and where we're going. So I'm going to push it over here. Here's our next star of the show.
Thank you very much, Cathy. Morena, everyone. Lovely to be with you this morning. Yes, I'm Maree. I am the strategic leader for inclusion for Cluster 4. So our strategic inclusion team started last year. There were just 3 of us. And then this year it's grown to 7. So part of what we've been doing this year is developing shared understandings around inclusion and UDL and building on the fantastic work of Cathy over the years and the previous UDL team. So there are 4 other PLGs. We have a behaviour, a maths, a structured literacy, and a Māori strategic team. Our inclusion PLG, we each take an area of the strategic plan, and we set some goals around that. So we have 2 goals as an inclusion PLG. One is about working with schools and teachers to upskill them in inclusive practice. And the other one is supporting RTLB inclusive practice. Next slide, please. So we're very fortunate that actually we've had very little staff turnover in the last couple of years. So we are mostly going forward with those really good understandings that Cathy and the previous team built. So that those UDL are what guide our casework, and it's a lens through which we look at all of our casework. As Cathy said, we're listening carefully to schools at the moment and understanding what's on top for them and all the pressures that they have at the moment. So we are very flexible in how we use UDL as a framework in our casework. And we also we have over the years, we've been looking at UDL, we have embedded it across the stages of He Pikorua, and we have shared templates for data gathering, report writing, action plans, and our evidence that we gather as well. Next slide, please. So we have used UDL, as Cathy said, in school systems approaches. We've shared it at SENCO days. We've worked with schools and teacher-only days, and they have planned units using UDL approaches, and we've worked, at a syndicate level, at teacher capacity level, and then with groups and individual students. So in cluster 4, when we have in our action plan for an individual student, we always have a teacher capacity goal. So we usually have a goal around learning or behaviour, and then a teacher capacity goal as well. So that might involve understandings around inclusive frameworks, inclusive strategies. So we're looking at simple, practical tools, as Cathy said, sustainable, simple, practical, achievable ways that teachers can support inclusion in their classrooms. Thank you. And so, as Cathy mentioned, yes, we have the principles in our heads, and we're always, when we walk into classrooms, we're thinking about what's happening, what's working well around those principles, what's working well around engaging students, representation, action and expression, and where can we see some scope to do some more work. But we also have those little mantras in our head that we that guide our practice as well, such as necessary for some, beneficial for all, firm goals, flexible means, no such thing as average, and thinking about those jagged learner profiles. So that's a concept I talk to teachers about all the time, about, yes, they may have difficulties, but they have strengths as well. And how can we tap into those to support their learning? And I think that thinking about the 3 principles really supports our ecological approach. The other thing we're looking at is shifting thinking from the barriers are within the student to the barriers are within the environment. Thank you. Yeah, so that's one of our key messages when we're working with schools and teachers. One of the first things we need to do is look at developing inclusive mindsets so that we all have the same understandings. And often we're trying to shift from deficit thinking into an inclusive mindset. So that's where we will start. And that's just a little snapshot from the inclusive design modules. So we're doing a bit of a deep dive. We did some work with the school around those last year, but we've got quite a new PLG this year. So we are starting a bit of a deep dive into those inclusive design modules now. Thank you. So this is just getting into the nitty-gritty of casework now. And as I said, we have, over the years, we've developed many templates that around UDL that support our casework, and we've all shared those. And this is one that was developed by one of my colleagues, and it's just one that I use often, that I'll often do my initial observation using this UDL template, just going in and, as I said, seeing what's working well already across the 3 principles, and then starting to make some notes to myself about where we might be able to support the teacher. So it's a strength-based observation. It's a treasure hunt, and it's a lovely positive way to look at what's working well. Thank you. If you could share the next slide. This is another template that we use in our casework. This is around student voice. So again, this is adapted from some work that another colleague did. So you can see, and it's actually using the old principles. We do need to go through and start updating things using the new principles. But what I do when I sit with students is I actually, just thinking about cognitive load, I take each of those little strategies around the principles, and I chop them up. So, and we just look at one at a time, and I say, oh, does this help your learning? Discussing it with others, and they will say either this helps my learning a lot, or it doesn't help me sometimes. Often when you pick up things like graphic organizers, for example, they haven't used them, or looking at examples, they're not sure what you mean. So sometimes if you explain it, they say they can understand it, but often teachers aren't using graphic organizers. So that's a mental note there. And that has been really powerful way of gathering student voice. And often I will use that. So we stick those on one at a time. And when we look at that and I show it to the teacher in a feedback meeting, you could just about usually plan your intervention from it, because the students have just such a fantastic knowledge of what supports their learning and what doesn't. Next slide, please. This is, again, is another template that's been developed in collaboration with one of my colleagues. So that's not the whole template, that's just a little snapshot of it. But this, sometimes it might use this in data gathering, but often I'll use this once I get to the intervention stage and we've got those shared understandings around inclusive practice, around learner variability. We've already had those discussions, and this is another way of giving teachers agency around the intervention. So they might go through this and just tick what they're already doing, and then select a couple of things that they want to work on, what they might be able to work on independently, and what they might need RTLB support to work on. Thank you very much. And then once we've gathered that data, of course, we're putting that into our data summary report. And I've just taken a little snapshot there of what that might look like when we're feeding back to teachers. So I will literally feed back, taking all of the data, their voice as well from interviews, student voice, looking at what is working well across the principles, and then looking at where we might do some work in those principles. Thank you. And then that's just a snapshot of an action plan where we incorporated some UDL approaches. So that was the goal there, to support teachers with inclusive strategies to increase student engagement and participation. And so looking at UDL was just one of the frameworks that we used. But really it was about inclusive approaches overall. Thank you very much. From there, we often will develop a learning plan looking at student strengths, what student barriers that are within the environment, and enablers and possible strategies, looking across the principles, incorporating the student voice and interest there. You'll see one thing that really hot on is what is our goal for learning. And I think that comes across in UDL really strongly. You know, clear, firm goals, flexible means is one of my mantras from UDL. And I think when you're really clear on your learning goal, then you can think about what are the barriers inherent within that goal, where and what could we do to support student learning once we know once we've identified the barriers. Next slide, please. And this is one that we have used. We used it with a teacher-only day when the teachers were doing some unit planning. And again, that's from the inclusive design modules, and actually thinking about the barriers and enablers across the principles as a template there. Thank you. So as a PLG, we've been very fortunate to attend some really high quality PD. And of course, we're looking at that PD using our UDL lens. And then we are able to share that new learning with the cluster. So that is part of our goal 2 around supporting developing inclusive practice for RTLB. So we've been feeding back our learning. So with the Inclusive Schools Conference, that was fantastic. We're just drip feeding in resources and strategies into team meetings in bite-sized chunks. This year with Shelley Moore, we are sharing some learning from Shelley Moore at a Senko Day next week. We've got a cluster meeting next week that we'll be sharing that learning. And we did sharing at cluster meetings last year as well. Thank you. So just looking at what are the key understandings that we start with to develop as our foundation in our casework. Thank you. So it's really about reframing that conversation and looking at not only how do we include learners who are different, but it's that we're not trying to fix them. We're not trying to make them all green dots. And those of you who have attended some Shelley Moore PD will be familiar with that concept. We want them to be the best sparkly purple dots that they can be, and everyone to be the best sparkly dot that they can be. So if learner diversity is a given and can be planned for, then how can we ensure that the environment is flexible where diversity can be anticipated, planned for, and celebrated? Yeah, so that's one of our key understandings, and I'm sure you'll find the same thing, that we're often still coming up against some deficit thinking. So that's one of the key ideas we're looking to work on with teachers in our work. Thank you. And instead of trying to fix the learner, we're looking at the ecological approach and the barriers, removing the barriers in the environment. Thank you. I love this quote. We're looking at the inclusion garden. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows and not the flower. And this is a lovely analogy that Shelley has shared around looking at the garden. What do all plants need? Sunlight, water, and soil. And then and in the same way, all learners learn through engagement, representation, and action and expression. And that's your universal. All learners need those 3 things. Thank you. But just as all learners need the sun, the water, and the soil, sometimes some learners need more or different things. So she talks about some might need more sun or shade, and some, like the wasabi, is apparently the hardest plant to grow. So we link that up to across the tiers of Te Tuapapa, thinking about what do all learners need to support their learning, and then on top of that, layered on top, what do some learners need and what do specific learners need to, in order to engage in the curriculum. Thank you. Yes, and that's just a diagram that supporting that. That they need the sun, the soil, and the dirt. Everybody needs that, but they might need tier 3 support on top of that, tailored support. Thank you. So then thinking about, well, how do we do that? And that's always the question that teachers ask, isn't it? How do we do that? And that can be tricky sometimes when we're to implement. And so we're supporting teachers with that. How do you teach it to all? And then make it a choice for some. And with limited resources, that can sometimes be tricky. For example, using fidgets and introducing them using a universal approach, and then making them a choice. It might be you don't have enough fidgets to introduce it universally as a whole class, but could you introduce it to a group at a time so everybody gets a chance to have a go? And then eventually only those learners who really need it will be using it. Thank you. And I'm just going to share a story for one of my colleagues. I think she's in this Zoom now. Was talking about how she'd seen that in action where there was a learner who the teacher wanted support to engage them in tidying up in the classroom. So they had a checklist on the board they developed around what needed to be done at tidy up time. And the teacher said, oh, so many of the learners in the class are using it. So that's a tool that's developed for a specific learner that's used universally. Okay, thank you. Oh, yes. And I love this way of thinking that inclusive design is baked in from the outset. And I think Katie Novak talked about that last year, that when you just adding accommodations on top, that's not inclusive design. And it's the same with a blueberry muffin. It's not a blueberry muffin if you just take a plain muffin and stick a blueberry on top. That's not a blueberry muffin. The whole experience of a blueberry muffin is the biting into the sweet, gooey blueberries. And it's the same with inclusive design. When you're planning for learner variability, you need to plan for it at the outset. So that's your tier 1 universal, and then thinking about what extra support do learners need on top of that. Thank you. So that is thinking about inclusive curriculum design is the roadmap, we think, to teacher sanity, rather than planning for differentiation and maybe having half a dozen learners that you're trying to adapt the curriculum for. Instead, starting with planning for variability from the outset. That's where we're doing a lot of work at the moment. And as I said before, around firm goals, flexible means, often find when I'm talking to teachers, when I say, what is your learning goal, that they need support to be thinking about learning goals coming from the curriculum. The goal is, as Shelley said with some of her PD, when she asked the teacher, what's your learning goal? And they said, oh, we're learning about Napoleon. So Napoleon is not the learning goal. And I know there's just a couple of examples of when I've asked the teacher, what's your learning goal? Oh, it's to make a card. And well, where does that sit in the curriculum? Because once you have your clear goal from the curriculum, then you can think about what might be the barriers inherent in that goal. And also thinking about what is your verb in your learning goal. Next slide, please. Oh, just flip back again. Please. Thank you. Yeah, just there. So I was working with a teacher last week and I said, what's your goal? She said to write a plan for a single paragraph outline. And I said, I think the verb is not right. The verb is to plan. So your goal is around planning for writing. The plan does not have to be written. The plan could be told orally. It could be drawn. and I don't know how they could possibly show it in a kinesthetic way, but it doesn't have to be written at this stage. That's not the goal. And very seldom is the verb around writing. So that's, yeah, a quote from Katie Novak. UDL is all about firm goals and flexible means, and the belief that everyone can work towards the same firm goals if they have flexible pathways to get there. Last, I think, yeah, next slide. Yeah, that, and then so what is the learning goal? And as I said, the importance around looking at the verb of that learning goal, and some work. One thing I've been thinking about lately is around Bloom's taxonomy, and doing some work with teachers around that. And how can you plan for inclusive curriculum design using Bloom's taxonomy, and everyone has the same learning goal, but then the way that they access it and achieve it can be different at different levels of thinking skills, higher and lower order thinking skills. So I can identify, I can name, I can match, I can sort. I'm still achieving the learning goal at its most simple level. But then our learners who maybe our gifted learners, our higher achieving learners, they might want to be hypothesizing, comparing, designing, working at that much higher up the thinking skills. Next, please. Yes, and so from there, once we've developed those shared understandings, that's when we then are able to zoom in and out of the UDL guidelines and checkpoints. Thank you. That's Cathy in summary.
So we're just going to wrap it up. Thanks. I'm sorry, it was a bit of a whistle whirlwind and we spoke really fast, but I think big ups to Maree and her leadership with the team that she's got at the moment. They're just doing a fabulous job and upskilling us as we go. So we just know that with our practice, we need to use evidence-based approaches, and the UDL is an inclusive framework for that. There's no such thing as a UDL expert. We don't see ourselves as experts. We feel like it's forever evolving. We're evolving. The current landscape around the mandates and things, we're evolving around what that looks like in structured literacy. And in our approach, the UDL, the inclusion strategic group, weave all their work through the other three pillars, which I think fits really nicely, because inclusion is the totally underpinning thing that drives our practice. Collaboration and sharing is a central part of that journey, and I think we are doing that really well. I hear people talking all the time in the offices around what did you do for this and have a look at this, and lots of ideas. And basically, inclusion is our core business. We need to know how to support teachers with this, and we need to keep it very simple. And I think that's it from us.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Cathy and Maree. That was awesome. There will be a thank a little later as well, I think. But just questions. Part-time, we've had a lot of things in the chat about wanting you to share your, can you please share your resources and the Bloom's taxonomy, Bloom's connections, amazing. But if you have any other questions, if you could just put your hand up, you know, your virtual hand or your real one, entirely up to you, and we can get you to ask Cathy or Maree those questions. And Cathy has said she'd love to share that stuff. That's awesome. Thank you so
I want to
much.
go up north again. Susan?
There was a question about how have the principles changed?
Yeah, there was right at the very beginning.
Yeah, well, they've done a huge amount of research and gathered a whole lot of voice, and it took several years to develop the principles, to redevelop version 3 of the principles. And they do have some great little videos that are not long on the CAST website that explain the changes. but they've taken into account cognitive load theory and around the engagement principle. There's a lot more representation around belonging and the importance of identity and student culture. They've removed any language that they felt had any bias, and they've also shifted the focus so that it's not so much the teacher as the expert. But yeah, I suggest if you want to know more, go onto the CAST website and you can find, I think there's a little 3-minute video that explains the changes.
Thanks for that, Maree. That's awesome. So, can you please repeat the name of the website?
Well, that would be CAST, C-A-S-T. It's probably cast.org.
I think it's cast.org.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Are there any other patai? I think you did such a good job. There you go. Cathy's put it in the chat for you. You've done such a good job of explaining it. They don't need to ask any questions. Yeah. Moving on then, we will looks like we're going to finish on time for once, which will be really good. So we will move on and complete the rest of the PowerPoint. Okay, there's the patai one. Right, what's next? So connect, join the UDL group. There's a link there for you. Start conversation and encourage other RTLB to join the group. Now there is a website and also a Facebook page. That's the website one there. Inspire, add inspirational quotes or other materials to the discussion on the website. Please add to the Facebook page. Remember to share anything you find inspiring, as I'm sure this will inspire other people. Uplift, read the latest blog about Shelley Moore. There's the link there, and share far and wide. There are also lots of really awesome other blogs on the website. Please go take a look. And the date to remember is week 4 next term, 6th of August, 8:30. Guest speaker is Madeleine Wilcox from Neurodiversity in Education Project, which is also another next group. And there's a link there to that website. Thank you. Next. So there are some QR codes that will take you straight to it if that's what you are into. And there's a list of things. Select public UDL and join the group. These slides are going to be shared. The video recording will be shared also for you. So you'll be able to access them. Next page.
So just before we finish with karakia, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Cathy and Maree for joining us today and sharing what looks like a massive amount of mahi. I guess the reward is going to be that you get a road trip to clusters 1 and 2. Thanks, guys. Me ino e tātou. Kia tau te manaakitanga, i runga i tēnā o tātou. Kia piki te ora, kia piki te maramatanga, kia hoki pai atu, kia hoki pai mai, tūturu whakamaua, kia tīnā, haumie, hui, tāiki. See you in week 4 of term 3.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.